The Alpha King knows what happens at the end of this journey. He's known since the first night he followed her into the Vale Woods, known since he watched her build a fire with hands that should have been trembling, known that every step she takes southeast brings him closer to a choice he's been avoiding for 9 years. Kill her, bind her, or confess. The forest doesn't care which option he picks, but it's watching, and so is she. Because Mara isn't walking toward freedom. She's walking toward a shrine that will strip a king of everything, unless he strips himself first. The question isn't whether he'll stop her. It's whether he can stop himself. The fire cracked too loud. Mara didn't look up. She kept her hands steady as she fed another branch into the flames, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she had all the time in the world. As if she didn't know someone was watching from the tree line 30 paces east. He'd been there for 4 nights now. Hello, friend. Before we go deeper into Mara's story, I just want to say, I'm so glad you're here, truly. Whether you're curled up in bed, taking a break from the chaos, or walking somewhere under your own sky, thank you for choosing to be here with me. I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment and let me know. And listen, if you haven't subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that button now. Because what's coming? You're not going to want to miss a single moment. Trust me on that. Now, back to the forest. Mara pulled her knees closer to her chest, the coarse wool of her exile cloak scratching against her bare shins. The stone-bound elders had stripped her of everything soft when they cast her out. No family name, no pack scent, no protection under moon law. Just this cloak, a flint, and 3 days' worth of dried meat that was gone by dawn of the second day. They'd called it mercy. She called it theater. Because Mara wasn't supposed to survive the forest. She was supposed to disappear into it like smoke, like every other exile before her who'd refused the throne's claim on their blood. The elders had smiled when they opened the gate. The forest will judge you, they'd said. If you are worthy, you will return. Lies, pretty lies wrapped in ritual language. No one returned from the Vale Woods. Except Mara wasn't trying to return. She was trying to reach the shrine. The fire popped again, and this time she let her gaze drift, just slightly, toward the darkness between the pines. Nothing moved, but the air had changed. It always changed when he stepped closer. The night seemed to hold its breath. Even the insects went quiet. Mara's pulse should have spiked. Her wolf should have been clawing at her ribs, screaming danger, predator, run. But her wolf had gone silent 3 years ago, the night the elders fed her the binding tea and told her she was too broken to shift, too weak to be anything but Omega. Another lie. Her bones knew the truth. They always had. She felt it now, the faint hum beneath her skin, the living map her bloodline had carried for 1,000 years. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a gift. It was a sentence. A geographic memory etched into marrow and nerve, passed from mother to daughter, each generation carrying the path to the one place kings feared most. The Covenant Shrine, where oaths were not sworn, they were enforced. Mara exhaled slowly and tilted her head, as if considering the stars. She let her voice carry, soft and conversational, into the dark. You know, if you're going to watch me every night, you could at least bring firewood. Silence. Then, a crack, boot on dry branch. He didn't answer. He never did. But she felt the shift in the air, the way his presence pressed closer, just to the edge of the firelight's reach. She still didn't turn. Didn't give him the satisfaction. 4 nights, she continued, her tone light, almost amused. 4 nights of lurking like a ghost. I'm starting to think you're worse at hunting than the elders claimed. Another long silence. Then, from the shadows, a voice, low, rough, edged with something that might have been irritation or might have been fascination. You should be afraid. Mara smiled into the fire. Of you? Or of whatever you're pretending to hunt out here? She heard it then, the soft exhale that wasn't quite a laugh. It sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with cold, because she knew that voice. Every wolf in the stone-bound packs knew that voice. Alpha King Theo, ruler of the 6 territories, undefeated in challenge for 9 years, the wolf who'd unified the packs under one crown through sheer brutality and political brilliance. And he was stalking her. The elders said you were tracking a rogue spirit, Mara said, still not looking at him. A threat to the borders. Funny, I haven't seen any spirits, just you. You wouldn't see a rogue spirit if it was breathing down your neck. Maybe. She poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. Or maybe there is no spirit. Maybe you're just here because you can't let me reach where I'm going. The silence that followed was different, heavier. She'd struck something true. Mara finally turned her head, just enough to glimpse him. He stood at the very edge of shadow, half illuminated by firelight, tall, broad-shouldered. His dark hair fell just past his jaw, and his eyes, those eyes, gleamed amber in the reflected flames. He wore no crown here, no ceremonial armor, just dark leather and boots caked with mud. He looked tired. You don't know what you're walking toward, Theo said quietly. Don't I? Mara met his gaze and held it. I refused the ritual mating, so you had your elders exile me. You thought the forest would kill me before I could reach the shrine, but it didn't. So now you're here, buying time, steering me in circles every night, hoping I'll starve or freeze or lose my way before I finish what my bloodline started. His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. Mara rose to her feet, slow and fluid, and faced him fully. The firelight cast her shadow long and strange across the ground. The question is, why? What happens if I reach it, Alpha King? What are you so afraid of? For a moment, she thought he might actually answer. His hand flexed at his side, and something raw flickered across his face, something that looked almost like regret. But then his expression shuddered. He stepped back into the darkness, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Get some sleep, Mara. Tomorrow you'll need your strength. And just like that, he was gone. But his scent lingered, pine and smoke and something wild, something that made her bones hum in recognition. Mara sank back down by the fire, her heart pounding now, her hands trembling just slightly. She pressed her palm flat against the earth and felt it, the pull, the map in her blood, tugging her southeast. Toward the shrine, toward the end of his reign. Or the beginning of something else entirely. Because the forest wasn't protecting her. It was protecting him from what she was about to make him face. Is Theo following her out of fear, or is there something deeper happening here? Something even he doesn't understand yet? Drop your thoughts below in the comment section. And if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that now, because this story is about to take you somewhere you won't expect. I'll be here waiting when you're ready for what comes next. Mara didn't sleep. She lay on her side, watching embers pulse like dying stars, and let the memories come. They always came in the dark, when her body was still but her mind refused rest. 3 years ago, she'd been chosen. Not honored, chosen. There was a difference the common wolves never understood. The binding ceremony wasn't a wedding, it was a transfer of power cloaked in silk and moonlight. The throne needed heirs, yes, but more than that, it needed legitimacy. Bloodlines like Mara's carried something the crown could never manufacture: ancestral weight, old law recognition, the kind of authority that made lesser alphas bow without question. Her mother had tried to warn her the night before the ceremony. She'd come to Mara's chamber, face drawn, hands shaking as she pressed a small iron key into her daughter's palm. You have a choice, she'd whispered. Use it. Mara hadn't understood then. The key opened nothing in their house. But later, in the ritual hall, when the elders painted the binding marks across her wrists and throat, when Theo stood silent at the altar watching her with those unreadable amber eyes, she'd felt it. The map in her bones had screamed. Not in pain, in warning. Because the binding wasn't just symbolic, it was a lock. Once completed, her bloodline's covenant power would be absorbed into the throne, neutralized, made decorative. She would become what they called her, Omega. Soft, compliant, useful only for bearing children who'd never know what they'd lost. So Mara had run. She dropped the ceremonial cup, shattered it on stone, and walked out of the hall, while 300 wolves watched in frozen silence. She'd expected Theo to stop her, to drag her back, to make an example of her defiance. Instead, he'd let her go. For 3 days, she'd lived in her mother's house, waiting for punishment. It came, but not the way she'd imagined. The elders arrived with scrolls and sad smiles. They declared her unstable, unable to shift, a danger to herself. They fed her the binding tea, a poison that didn't kill, just muted, and when her wolf went silent, They had their proof. Exile was the mercy option. The forest or the cell, everyone knew which one meant death. But Mara's mother had pressed that key into her hand one more time before the guards came. And this time, she'd whispered the truth. The shrine will recognize you. It doesn't need your wolf. It needs your bones. Now, lying in the dirt with a king's shadow circling her each night, Mara understood. She wasn't weak. She was dangerous. Not because she could fight. She couldn't. Not anymore. Not without her wolf. But because she could testify. Her bloodline existed for one purpose: to hold kings accountable, to appear at the shrine when a ruler broke the original covenant, to force them to answer for their power. And Theo had broken it. She didn't know how yet, didn't know what crime or cruelty had triggered her bones' recognition. But the map didn't lie. It pulled her southeast with increasing urgency, like a compass needle finding true north. Mara sat up, rubbing her arms against the cold. Her gaze drifted to the tree line where Theo had stood hours before. He wasn't there now, but she could still feel him, somewhere close, watching, waiting, caught between duty and something that looked dangerously like guilt. Tomorrow, she'd walk southeast again, and tomorrow night, he'd appear at her fire again, pretending to guard her while actually delaying her. But delays only worked if you didn't know the destination. And Mara knew exactly where she was going. The shrine was 3 days away, maybe 4 if Theo kept steering her off course. Time enough for a king to decide whether he'd rather face judgment or become the monster the crown required. Time enough for Mara to decide if the man watching her in the dark was worth saving at all. The wolf trap nearly took her foot. Mara saw the disturbed leaves a heartbeat too late. She twisted mid-step, but her boot caught the edge. Iron teeth snapped shut, missing flesh by inches, clamping onto leather and lace. She hit the ground hard, breath knocked from her lungs. Before she could move, he was there. Theo dropped from nowhere, hands already on the trap, wrenching it open with strength that made the metal scream. He threw it aside and grabbed her ankle, checking for blood, his fingers surprisingly gentle. "Don't move." His voice was rough. "Let me see." "I'm fine." Mara tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "You're not fine. That trap wasn't for deer." His eyes met hers, and for the first time in 4 nights, she saw real fear there. "It was for you." The words hung between them like smoke. Mara's pulse hammered. The elders didn't trust the forest to finish the job. Theo released her ankle and sat back on his heels, jaw tight. "They sent hunters 2 days ago. I've been dismantling traps since dawn." She stared at him. "Why?" "Because exile is supposed to be exile, not execution." He stood, offering his hand. "And because if you die out here, no one will know the truth." Mara ignored his hand and pushed herself up. Her ankle throbbed but held weight. "What truth? That you're afraid of a shrine? That I'm afraid of what happens when you reach it." Theo stepped closer, and the firelight from her camp, 30 paces back, caught the exhaustion on his face. "You think this is about power, about keeping my throne. It's not." "Then what is it about?" He was silent for a long moment, something warring behind his eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. 9 years ago, I took the crown by force. The old king was corrupt, brutal. He used blood magic to extend his reign, sacrificed pack members to keep himself strong. I killed him in challenge, broke his spells, freed the packs. Theo's hands flexed at his sides. But to make it legal, to unite the territories under one rule, I had to bypass certain laws, old laws, laws that required consent from the balance bearers. Mara's breath caught. "My bloodline. Your grandmother was still alive then. I sent emissaries. She refused to acknowledge my claim, said I'd taken power the same way he did, through violence, not consent. So the elders and I..." He stopped, jaw working. "We erased her, made it look like natural death, burned the records, pretended balance bearers were myth, not law." The forest seemed to hold its breath. "And then I was born," Mara said slowly. "And then you were born." Theo's voice cracked. "The last one, the only one who could walk into that shrine and invoke the old covenant, who could declare my reign unlawful and strip me of every alliance, every treaty, every pact bond I've built." He looked at her, and the rawness in his gaze made her chest ache. "I didn't want to bind you in marriage, Mara. I wanted to bind your power, to make you pack, make you mine, So the shrine couldn't recognize you as separate, as judge. The truth settled over her like snow. So you let them exile me instead, she whispered, hoping I'd die. No, the word was fierce. I let them exile you because I couldn't stomach the alternative. Binding you would have destroyed who you are. And killing you, his voice dropped. I've done terrible things to hold this crown, but I won't do that. Mara stepped closer, searching his face. So instead you follow me, delay me, dismantle traps meant for my throat. Yes. Why? Theo met her eyes, and something shifted between them, something that felt like gravity. Because maybe, he said quietly, I deserve judgment. They walked together after that. Not side by side, Theo kept 3 paces back, close enough to intervene if another trap appeared, far enough to maintain the fiction that he was still hunting, still separate. But the silence between them had changed. It was no longer hostile. It was careful, weighted with things neither of them knew how to say. Mara's bones pulled her southeast, steady as a drumbeat. 2 days to the shrine now, maybe less. She could feel Theo's tension increasing with every mile, the way his gaze tracked the tree line, the way his shoulders never fully relaxed. He was afraid, not of her, of himself. The hunters, Mara said as they crossed a shallow creek. How many? 4, maybe 5. Theo crouched to refill his water skin. They're tracking you by broken branches, disturbed earth. They're good, but they're not forest-born. I can keep them off your trail another day. And then? He didn't answer. Mara stopped walking. Theo, what happens when we reach the shrine? He straightened slowly, water dripping from his hands. When he looked at her, something raw flickered across his face. The covenant will judge me. If it finds me unworthy, if it declares my rule unlawful, every alliance I've built collapses. The packs fracture. And wolves like the old king, wolves who want chaos, they'll rise up and take what's left. So the alternative is to let corruption stand? To let you keep a throne built on murder? My reign isn't corrupt. His voice sharpened. I've brought peace, ended blood feuds, protected the weak. Everything I've done. Everything you've done was built on a lie. Mara stepped closer, her voice quiet but cutting. You killed my grandmother to hide the truth. You tried to bind me to erase it. And now you're following me because you're afraid to face it. Theo's jaw clenched. I'm following you because if you die, the cycle continues. Another king, another cover-up. At least with me. You have a chance to change it. Change it how? By convincing me to turn around? To let you off the hook? No. The word came out rough. By making me face it. By forcing me to answer for what I've done. He moved closer, and Mara's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. You think I'm stalking you to stop you. I'm not. I'm stalking you because I don't trust myself to let you walk into that shrine alone. Because if something happens to you before you reach it, the truth dies with you. And I can't, his voice cracked. I can't let that happen. The confession hung between them like a bridge. Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to hate him. She should hate him. But standing here, watching exhaustion and guilt and something achingly close to honor war across his face, she couldn't. You could stop me, she whispered. Right now. You're stronger, faster. You could drag me back to the capital, lock me away, and no one would question it. I know. So why don't you? Theo reached out slowly, like approaching something wild, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were warm, calloused, trembling slightly. Because you're not my enemy, Mara. You're my reckoning. And maybe, he exhaled, the sound shaky. Maybe that's what I've needed all along. The moment stretched taut between them. Mara felt it, the pull that had nothing to do with the map in her bones. The recognition that felt too much like the mate bond the elders had tried to manufacture, except this was real, earned through honesty and fear and impossible choices. Then a branch snapped in the distance. Theo's head whipped toward the sound, his entire body going rigid. They're closer than I thought. He grabbed her hand. We need to move. Now. They ran. Through underbrush and shadow, Mara's ankles screaming with every step, but Theo's hand steady in hers, pulling her forward. Behind them, voices echoed, rough, determined, getting closer. The hunters had found them, and the shrine was still a day away. They didn't stop running until the voices faded. Theo pulled her into a hollow beneath a massive oak, its roots creating a natural cave. They pressed together in the dark, both breathing hard, his hand still gripping hers. "How did they find us so fast?" Mara gasped. "They didn't." Theo's voice was grim. "They knew where you were going. They're not tracking, they're intercepting." The words hit her like ice water. Someone told them. Someone who knows about the shrine. He shifted, and in the dim light filtering through roots, she saw his expression harden. "Someone on my council." Before Mara could respond, footsteps crunched above them. Close, too close. They froze. "She can't be far," a rough voice said. "The king's tracks lead this way too." "You think he's protecting her?" Another voice, younger, uncertain. "I think he's keeping her alive until he figures out what to do with her. The elders want her dead, but he's too soft. Always has been." Theo's hand tightened on Mara's. She felt his rage like heat. "Doesn't matter," the first hunter said. "We kill her, we get paid. The king can't prove anything if there's no body. Forest takes plenty of exiles." The footsteps moved away. They waited in tense silence until the forest settled again. Then Theo released her hand and slumped back against the earth, something broken in his posture. "They're right," he said quietly. "I am too soft." "You're not soft. You're conflicted." Mara studied his face in the shadows. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He looked at her, and the rawness there made her chest ache. "I can't protect you and let you reach the shrine. I can't keep my crown and face judgment. I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't be both the king they need and the man who deserves you." The last words came out barely above a whisper. Mara's breath caught. "Theo." "You feel it too." He shifted closer, his gaze searching hers. "This pull between us. It's not the manufactured bond they tried to force. It's real. And it's making everything impossible." She wanted to deny it, couldn't. Because he was right. Something had been building between them with every shared silence, every confession, every moment he chose her truth over his comfort. It felt like gravity, like recognition, like the mate bond that should have been theirs from the beginning, if crowns and lies hadn't gotten in the way. "I'm not an Omega," Mara said suddenly. The truth spilled out, urgent and necessary. "I never was. The binding tea didn't mute my wolf because I'm weak. It muted her because I'm a balance bearer. My bloodline exists to hold kings accountable. We're born with the authority to judge, to invoke old law, to force rulers to answer for their power." She pressed her hand flat against her chest, feeling her heartbeat, feeling the map pulse beneath skin and bone. "The forest doesn't protect me, Theo. It enforces me. It's pushing me toward the shrine because your reign needs to be measured, and I'm the only one left who can do it." Theo stared at her, something like awe and devastation warring on his face. "So what happens when we get there?" he whispered. "I don't know. The Covenant will decide." Mara reached out, her fingers brushing his jaw. "But I know this. You're not the old king. You took the crown through violence, yes, but you've ruled with something close to honor. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the shrine will see that. And if it doesn't?" She held his gaze. "Then we face the consequences together." Theo closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man accepting benediction. Or judgment. The truth is out now. Mara isn't broken. She's powerful. And Theo isn't just afraid of losing his crown. He's afraid of losing her. But can love survive accountability? Can a king built on lies become a man worthy of the truth? Stay with me, because what comes next will break them both before it makes them whole. The attack came at dawn. Mara woke to Theo's hand over her mouth, his eyes urgent in the gray light. 4 hunters surrounded their hollow, weapons drawn, faces grim with purpose. "Come out. Exile," the lead hunter called. "The Alpha King can't save you from pack law." Theo's jaw clenched. He moved to stand, to fight, but Mara grabbed his wrist, shook her head, because she understood what he didn't yet. If he revealed himself here, if he fought his own wolves to protect her, the council would have proof of his corruption. They'd call it bewitchment. Madness. They'd strip him of the crown before she ever reached the shrine. And everything he'd built would burn. "Stay hidden," she breathed against his palm. "Trust me." She saw the refusal in his eyes, but she also saw the moment he understood, the terrible choice she was making for both of them. Mara crawled out of the hollow alone. The hunters seized her immediately, rough hands dragging her to her feet. She didn't resist, didn't cry out. She met the lead hunter's gaze with something cold and certain. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. He backhanded her across the face. The world spun. Blood filled her mouth. And in the hollow beneath the oak, she felt Theo's rage like a living thing, barely contained, nearly breaking free. "Don't," she willed him silently. "Don't give them this." "The elders want you dead," the hunter said, grabbing her hair, forcing her head back. "But they didn't say how, so we're going to take our time. Make sure the forest knows what happens to wolves who defy the throne." One of the younger hunters shifted uncomfortably. "Cade, maybe we should just—" "Shut up." Cade's grip tightened. "She's Omega trash. She doesn't deserve mercy." The slur hit something deep. Not because it was true, but because it revealed everything. The system that had used that word to silence her, to justify her erasure, to pretend her bloodline's power was weakness instead of threat. Mara smiled, blood on her teeth. "I'm not Omega, and you're not hunters. You're just scared men following scared orders." Cade raised his blade. The world slowed, and Theo erupted from the hollow like violence given form. He moved faster than thought, one hunter down, throat crushed, another screaming, arm broken. Cade tried to swing the blade, but Theo caught his wrist and twisted, the snap echoing through the trees. It was over in seconds. 4 hunters on the ground, 3 dead, 1 whimpering, crawling away through leaves. Theo stood over them, chest heaving, knuckles bloody, eyes burning amber with barely controlled shift. When he looked at Mara, she saw the moment it hit him. What he'd just done, what he'd just revealed. "Theo," she whispered. "I couldn't." His voice broke. "I couldn't let them." "I know." She moved toward him, but he stepped back. "They'll report this." His hands shook. "The one who escaped, he'll tell the council I killed my own wolves to protect an exile. They'll call it treason, madness. They'll invoke emergency law and strip the crown before we ever reach the shrine." The truth settled like stones. "We're out of time," Mara said. "No." Theo's expression hardened with something terrible. "You're out of time. I just destroyed your only chance." "What are you talking about?" He looked at her with devastation and resolve. "The council will mobilize by nightfall. 50 wolves, maybe more. They'll hunt you down, kill you, and declare it lawful execution of a rogue exile who corrupted the king." His voice cracked. "I can't protect you from an army, Mara. I can barely protect you from 4. Then we run faster." "There's nowhere to run." Theo closed his eyes. "I failed you. I failed everything." And for the first time since she'd met him, Mara saw the Alpha King break. "Stop." Mara's voice cut through his despair like a blade. Theo looked at her, broken and lost, and she saw it clearly now. The weight he'd been carrying alone, the impossible choices, the crown that had turned protector into prisoner. "You didn't fail," she said. "You chose. There's a difference." "I chose wrong." "No." She stepped forward, grabbed his bloodied hands, forced him to meet her eyes. "You chose me over your crown, over your carefully constructed reign, over everything you've spent 9 years protecting." Her voice softened. "That's not failure, Theo. That's the first honest thing you've done since you took that throne." He stared at her, something raw and uncertain flickering across his face. "The council is coming," Mara continued, her mind racing, pieces clicking into place. 50 wolves, you said. They'll hunt me, kill me. Erase the last balance bearer and seal your reign permanently. I won't let them. You won't have to." She released his hands and pressed her palm flat against the earth. The map in her bones pulsed, stronger now, urgent. "Because we're not running anymore. Mara, the shrine is still half a day away." "I don't need to reach the shrine," the truth crystallized as she spoke it. "The shrine is just a place, a symbol. But the covenant?" She looked up at him, certainty flooding through her. "The covenant is in my blood, in my bones. It's been with me this entire time." Theo went very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the forest has been watching you, testing you. Every night you followed me, every trap you dismantled, every choice you made between duty and truth. It was all part of the judgment." Mara rose to her feet, feeling something ancient stir beneath her skin. The balance bearers don't invoke the covenant. We are the covenant. And you've been answering to it since the moment you decided to let me live. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. So what happens now? Theo's voice was barely a whisper. Mara stepped closer, close enough to feel his heat, his exhaustion, his fear. Now you make a choice. The council is coming. They'll demand my death and your compliance. You can give them what they want, execute me, keep your crown, maintain the lie. Or, she held his gaze, you can stand with me when they arrive, confess what you've done, face judgment publicly, and let the Pax decide if a king who chooses truth over power deserves to lead. That's not a choice, Theo said roughly. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to break the cycle. Mara reached up, her hand cupping his jaw. Your grandmother's reign ended in blood because she refused accountability. You killed her to stop the corruption. But you became what you fought against the moment you hid the truth. The moment you erased my bloodline to protect your crown. Theo closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I can't undo what I've done. No, but you can face it. She felt his pulse racing beneath her fingers. The covenant doesn't demand perfection, Theo. It demands honesty. It asks one question. Does this king rule through fear or through consent? Answer that, publicly, and let the Pax judge. He opened his eyes, and she saw the moment the decision crystallized. If I do this, he said quietly, I lose everything. Not everything. Mara's voice was steady. You lose the crown, but you keep yourself, your honor, your truth. She paused. You keep me. The words hung between them like a vow. Theo pulled her close, his forehead pressing against hers. Then let them come. In the distance, wolves howled, the council's army, closing in. But for the first time since this began, Mara wasn't afraid. Because the stalker had become the guarded one, and the rejected had become judge. They waited in the clearing where Mara's exile had begun. Full circle. Intentional. The council arrived with 50 wolves, armed and furious, led by Elder Nathan, the same wolf who'd smiled when he'd cast her out. His face twisted when he saw Theo standing beside her, hand in hers, blood still on his knuckles. Alpha King. Nathan's voice was sharp with false concern. Step away from the exile. She's corrupted your judgment. No. Theo's voice carried across the clearing. She's clarified it. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Nathan's eyes narrowed. You killed your own hunters to protect her. That's treason against pack law. I killed murderers following unlawful orders. Theo stepped forward, still holding Mara's hand. Orders you gave to eliminate the last balance bearer before she could reach the Covenant Shrine and expose what we did 9 years ago. The silence was absolute. I don't know what she's told you, Nathan said carefully, but balance bearers are myth. My grandmother wasn't myth. Mara's voice rang clear. You murdered her, burned the records, erased my bloodline from history because we had the authority to judge corrupt kings, because we could invoke old law and strip rulers who took power through violence instead of consent. Nathan's composure cracked. The old king was brutal. We did what was necessary. You did what was convenient. Theo's voice was steel. I killed a tyrant, but to legitimize my reign, I needed balance-bearer approval. When Mara's grandmother refused, we erased her, made it look natural. I've spent 9 years building peace on a foundation of murder and lies. The wolves shifted uneasily, loyalty warring with shock. This is confession under duress, Nathan said desperately. The exile has bewitched him. Show them, Theo said quietly to Mara. Show them what you are. Mara took a breath and pressed both palms flat against the earth. The map in her bones ignited. Light erupted from the ground where she touched, ancient symbols, glowing blue-white, spreading outward in perfect geometric patterns. They formed a circle around the clearing, and carved into the light were names. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Every balance-bearer who'd ever lived, every judgment they'd rendered, every king they'd held accountable. And at the center, burning brightest, her grandmother's name. Beside it, the manner of death, murdered by crown order. The wolves gasped. Even Nathan stumbled back. The Covenant remembers, Mara said, her voice resonating with something older than pack law. It remembers every king, every judgment, every truth buried for convenience. She turned to face the assembly. Theo took the crown through violence, but he's ruled with honor, protected the weak, ended blood feuds, brought peace. The question isn't whether he deserves to be stripped. The question is whether you consent to his continued rule, now that you know the truth. She has no authority, Nathan started. She has the only authority that matters. An older wolf stepped forward from the crowd, gray-furred, scarred, ancient. I'm old enough to remember balance bearers. Old enough to know what happens when kings fear accountability. She looked at Theo. You could have killed her. Hidden this forever. Why didn't you? Theo met the elder's gaze steadily. Because truth matters more than power. Because she matters more than my crown. The elder studied him for a long moment. Then she knelt. One by one, the other wolves followed. Not all. Some remained standing, uncertain, conflicted. But enough. More than half the assembly, kneeling in acknowledgement. Not to the king. To the choice he'd made. Nathan's face contorted with rage. You're all fools. He's weak. Corrupted. No, Mara said quietly. He's human, finally. The light from the covenant symbols faded, but their message remained burned into memory. Theo turned to Mara, something fragile and hopeful in his eyes. What now? She smiled. Now you earn it. 3 months later, Mara stood at the edge of the covenant shrine. She'd finally reached it, not as an exile, but as a guest. Theo had insisted on accompanying her. No shadows this time, no secrets, just 2 people walking together toward truth. The shrine was smaller than she'd imagined, a circle of ancient stones covered in moss, the same symbols that had glowed in the clearing now carved into granite, permanent, unmovable. It's beautiful, Theo said quietly beside her. It's honest. Mara touched one of the stones, feeling the hum of old magic beneath her fingertips. That's what makes it beautiful. The Pax had voted 2 weeks after the clearing. Not unanimously, Nathan and his supporters had fled rather than accept the new order. But enough wolves had chosen to keep Theo as Alpha King, with one condition. Mara would serve as balance bearer officially, a permanent check on royal power. A living reminder that consent mattered more than crowns. It wasn't the ending either of them had expected, but it was the one they'd earned. I keep thinking about that first night, Theo said, his hand finding hers. When you told me to bring firewood if I was going to keep stalking you. Mara laughed softly. You were terrible at pretending you weren't there. I was terrible at a lot of things. He turned to face her fully, his amber eyes soft in the dappled sunlight. But I'm learning. With you. She reached up, cupping his face. We're both learning. He kissed her then, slow and deep and certain. Not the desperate, stolen moments they'd shared in the forest, but something quieter. More permanent. A promise that had nothing to do with magic or fate and everything to do with choice. When they pulled apart, Mara rested her forehead against his. The elders tried to manufacture a bond between us, force something that should have been sacred. And instead we built something real. Theo's thumb traced circles on her wrist. Something that survives judgment. More than survives. Mara smiled. It's made us better. You're a king who answers to his people now. And I'm not rejected. I'm necessary. You always were. His voice was fierce. I was just too afraid to see it. They stood in the shrine for a long time, wrapped in sunlight and silence and the weight of choices made right. Eventually, they walked back toward the capital together. No longer stalker and prey, no longer king and exile. Just 2 wolves who'd learned that love wasn't about avoiding consequences, it was about facing them together. That power without accountability always feared the quiet ones. And that sometimes, the forest doesn't protect you from danger. It protects you through it. Mara's story is about something we all face. The moment when someone tries to make you small, to reject you, to convince you that your truth is weakness instead of strength. But here's what I want you to remember. Rejection can be a strategy used by those afraid of your potential. Power that avoids accountability always fears the quiet ones. And love? Real love isn't about forgiveness without consequence. It's about having the courage to face truth together. If this story moved you, if Mara and Theo's journey reminded you of your own strength, then do me a favor, subscribe. Because we're building something here. A space where stories matter, where truth matters, where you matter. And that video on your screen right now? Click it. Let's keep this journey going together. I'll be here, waiting to walk with you through the next story. Until then, stay strong, stay true, and remember, you're never as powerless as someone wants you to believe.